Rain fell hard over the rocky plains of Nereth 9, a lonely mining world on the edge of the Orion Belt. The wind howled through the narrow canyons and lightning flashed over the distant ridges. In a small wooden cabin, built from scrap metal and old colony panels, an alien woman named Celia sat near the heater. Her large violet eyes reflected the flicker of the flames, and the only sound she heard was the steady rhythm of rain on the roof. Celia was an engineer, one of the few who stayed behind after the mining crews left the planet. She liked the silence, the space and the calm, no bosses shouting, no alarms, no politics, only the wind, the hum of her machines, and her own quiet thoughts. But that peace ended with a single heavy knock. It was not the sound of metal falling, or a creature scratching. It was a knock made by a human hand, heavy and deliberate. The walls shook and dust fell from the ceiling. Celia froze. No one should have been here, not this far out, not during a storm. She reached for her shock pistol and stepped carefully toward the door. Her heart raced as the knock came again. Slower this time, like someone losing strength. "Who's there?" She called, her voice unsteady. There was a pause. Then a deep voice answered, muffled by the rain. "My name's Blake, Terran Fleet. Crash survivor. I need shelter." Celia's forefingers tightened around the door latch. A Terran. She had heard about humans. Tall, strong, unpredictable. Most aliens feared them. But Celia was more curious than afraid. She slowly unsealed the door. A rush of cold wind blew in, spraying her face with rain, and there he was. A giant figure covered in mud and armor, his shoulder lights flickering weakly. His helmet cracked, steam rising from his gear. He was twice her height, broad as the doorway itself. Yet his voice, when he spoke again, was soft. "Please. I just need a roof till the storm passes." Celia stared at him. He looked powerful, but tired, almost broken. His breath came out in short, white clouds, and his eyes blew like plasma met hers, with quiet respect. "It's a tight cabin," she whispered, "but come in if you can fit." He gave a faint smile and crouched. Pushing through the narrow doorframe, the metal walls groaned as he passed through, scraping his armor against the edges. Celia stepped back to make space, watching him carefully. When he finally sat near the heater, the floor creaked under his weight. "Thank you," he said quietly. Removing his cracked helmet, he had short brown hair, a small scar over his left eye, and a look of someone who had seen too many battles. Celia hesitated, then placed a cup of warm broth in front of him. He nodded, his big hands wrapping around the tiny cup like it was made for a child. "What happened to your ship?" she asked. "Ambushed," he said simply. "We were on patrol. A pirate fleet came out of nowhere. They hit the engines. I ejected before it blew." Celia frowned. "The storm will hide your signal. No rescue team can find you till it clears." "Maybe that's for the best," Blake muttered. Staring into the flames, for a while, neither spoke. The sound of rain filled the room again. Celia studied his armor, marked with Terran insignia and burn scars. Humans were said to be stubborn survivors, and now one was sitting in her cabin. Too big for her furniture, too strange for her quiet world. Yet she didn't feel fear anymore, only a strange pull, a curiosity she couldn't explain. "You live here alone?" he asked, his deep voice calm. "Yes," she said. "I repair old mining drones and sell parts to traders when they pass by." "Brave," he said softly. "Most wouldn't survive here alone." Celia tilted her head. "Maybe I was waiting for something to happen," Blake chuckled, the sound low and warm. "Well, something just did." Lightning flashed outside, casting blue light across his face. He looked exhausted, but alert. "Your beacon," he said suddenly, pointing to a blinking panel on the wall. "It's still transmitting, right?" Yes, she answered, but only within a few kilometers. Blake frowned. That might draw attention. And not the good kind. Before she could ask, he was already moving. Switching off the transmitter, the cabin fell silent again. Celia watched him with confusion. You don't want to be found? He shook his head slowly. Not by them. Who is them? She pressed. He didn't answer, only looked out the window, where red lights flickered faintly in the storm clouds. Drones, scanning the valley, searching. Celia felt a chill run through her veins. Whoever hunted him wasn't far. And now they might come here. She stood beside him, her small frame barely reaching his shoulder. You brought danger to my door, she said quietly. I'm sorry, he replied. I didn't mean to. I just needed a place to breathe. Celia's gaze softened. Then you'll stay. At least till morning. Blake looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you, he said again, his voice rough but grateful, as thunder rolled across the plains. He leaned back, exhaustion finally taking him. Celia watched the human sleep, his breathing steady, his presence strangely comforting. Outside, the storm howled, and far beyond the clouds, something metallic moved through orbit, a ship, scanning for one missing Terran soldier. But inside the tiny cabin, warmth filled the air. A fragile peace had formed between two strangers, one human, one alien brought together by a single knock that shook the cabin. Morning came slow on Nereth 9. The rain had stopped, but fog still covered the valley like a white ocean. Inside the small cabin, Celia woke to the sound of heavy breathing, the kind that belonged to someone larger than life. She turned and saw Blake, the human soldier, sitting by the window, his armor half removed and his eyes scanning the mist outside. He looked like a mountain sitting in her tiny chair, calm yet dangerous, a silent storm in human form. Celia moved quietly, preparing a small bowl of steamed roots, the last of her supplies, when she placed it on the table. Blake looked at it as if he hadn't seen real food in weeks. Thank you, he said simply, his deep voice low and kind. She smiled a little. You eat, and I ask questions. He gave a tired grin. Fair deal, and began to eat slowly, careful not to break the spoon with his large hands. After a few minutes, she spoke again. Those red lights last night, they were drones, weren't they? Blake nodded. Yeah, hunter drones, small but fast, built to track Terran armor signals. Then you shut down my beacon to hide from them, she said softly. Yes, he replied. If they find me, they'll level this whole place. Celia crossed her arms. And you brought that danger here. He met her eyes, steady and honest. I didn't mean to. I just needed somewhere to breathe. Her anger melted. She sighed. You breathe too loud for this planet, he chuckled, the sound echoing off the walls. I get that a lot. Hours passed. Blake began to repair his damaged armor using Celia's tools. She watched him work, fascinated by his focus and the strange human technology. You people build machines like you build walls, she said. Always ready for war. He paused for a moment. War built us, I guess. His tone was quiet. Not proud, not ashamed, just true. Celia looked at him curiously. And what are you now? Soldier. He looked at the fire. A survivor. Maybe just a tired man looking for peace. She tilted her head. Then you came to the wrong planet. He smiled faintly. Maybe not. Maybe this is where peace hides. For the rest of the day, they worked together, fixing machines, patching leaks, and clearing mud from the vents. Celia taught him how to use her four-handed tools, and Blake showed her how Terran energy cores could power old mining drones. At first, they barely spoke, but slowly the silence between them turned gentle. She started to laugh at his awkward jokes, and he tried to move carefully in her small world. When he bent under the low ceiling, she teased. "You humans should come with a fold button." He laughed. "We tried, but our pride gets in the way." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, a strange hum filled the air. Celia's scanners blinked red again, showing movement in the North Valley. She rushed to the console. "They're back," she whispered. Blake stood instantly, grabbing his rifle, his muscles tensing like iron cables. "How far?" he asked. "Less than a kilometer," she said. "3 signals. Small drones." He turned off the lights. "They can't see heat inside." "Stay quiet." The cabin fell into darkness. Only the orange glow of dying fire remained. Outside, the faint buzz of flying machines drifted closer, red eyes slicing through the fog. Celia's heart pounded as she pressed her back against the wall. Blake stood by the window, rifle ready but silent, his breath steady. One drone hovered near the window, scanning. A small red beam swept across the room. Celia's hand trembled near her tool belt. Then Blake reached out, gently pushing her down before the beam touched her face. His shadow covered her completely. The drone paused, its sensors flickering, then turned away and drifted into the fog. When the sound faded, Celia exhaled. "They didn't see us." Blake nodded slowly, lowering his weapon. "Not yet. But they'll return. We can't fight them here," she said. "Then we move," he replied. "At nightfall." Celia frowned. "Move where?" "Up the ridge," Blake said. "There's an old Terran signal post, maybe still functional." She hesitated. "It's dangerous outside the valley." He looked at her gently. "It's dangerous everywhere, Celia? But staying still is worse." She stared at him for a long moment, seeing not just a soldier, but a man who carried weight heavier than his armor. Finally, she nodded. "Fine, but if we die?" "I'll haunt you," he smiled. "Deal." They spent the next hours packing supplies, tools, and one small energy cell. Blake repaired her hover sled to carry heavy gear. When he lifted the machine like it weighed nothing, Celia couldn't help but laugh. "Humans really don't understand limits." He looked at her, his blue eyes glowing faintly. "Limits are just suggestions." As night fell again, the two stood outside the cabin, mist swirling around their feet. The stars appeared above the storm clouds, and for the first time, Celia saw their pale light reflected in his armor. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," she replied, though her voice trembled a little. Behind them, the cabin that once kept her safe now looked small and fragile. 2 worlds had shared it, one built for solitude, the other for war, and now those worlds were leaving together, stepping into the fog where danger waited. Celia looked at him one last time, whispering, "Try not to break the planet on the way." He grinned. No promises. The hum of the hover sled rose into the cold air, and together they vanished into the mist. Above them, unseen in the clouds, the hunter drone circled again, but on the ground, a strange new bond was forming between the alien who feared nothing and the human who fit nowhere. And on Nerith 9, under a sky full of storms, 2 worlds began to walk the same path. The wind had grown colder as night covered the ridge. Celia and Blake climbed slowly through the mist, their boots sinking into wet soil and cracked stone. Behind them, the small cabin had faded into the fog, leaving only silence and memory. Above, flashes of distant lightning painted the sky a pale blue. Showing for a second the endless wilderness of Nerith 9, Blake walked in front. His armor lights dimmed to avoid detection. Celia followed close, her eyes glowing faintly violet as she scanned the ground for energy signatures. They were both exhausted, but neither spoke. The sound of the storm and their own breathing was enough to fill the space between them. Finally, they reached an old mining tunnel carved into the ridge. Celia brushed away dust from the metal sign. "Sectory Refinery." Abandoned 5 cycles ago. Blake nodded. Good. We can rest here. They entered the tunnel, their footsteps echoing against the steel walls. Old lights flickered weakly above them, still running on forgotten power cells. Inside, the air smelled of rust and oil. Broken tools and empty barrels were scattered everywhere. Celia found a clear corner and started setting up a small camp light. Blake removed the last pieces of his armor, revealing scars across his chest and shoulder. She looked at them silently, wondering what kind of war could carve such marks on living flesh. "You've seen battle," she said softly. He smiled without humor. "Too many," she hesitated, then asked, "Why were you alone out there?" Blake leaned against the wall. "Because someone wanted it that way," Celia frowned. "You mean the pirates?" He shook his head. "No, not them, someone higher. Someone inside the fleet." For a moment she said nothing. The Terran fleet had a dark reputation among the colony's heroes to some, tyrants to others. "Why would your own people betray you?" she asked. Blake looked at her with tired eyes. "Because I found something I wasn't supposed to." "What was it?" she whispered. Instead of answering, he reached into a small metal case, pulling out a glowing device the size of a heart. "This," he said quietly, "was hidden in my armor. Deep inside the core." Celia stepped closer, eyes wide. It pulsed with faint blue light. Alive, almost breathing. "What is it?" she asked. "A prototype," Blake said. "A Terran beacon that can override planetary defense networks," Celia gasped. "That means whoever controls it can invade any colony undetected." He nodded slowly. "Exactly. I was supposed to deliver it, but I couldn't. Not after I realized what it does." The truth settled heavy between them. Celia felt her stomach twist. "So you're a fugitive," Blake sighed. "Guess so. I destroyed the ship that carried the rest of the data. But they must think I still have the key. And now the drones are here to find you," she said. He looked at the glowing device. "And kill anyone who helps me." Celia crossed her arms. "You should have told me earlier. I didn't trust you yet," he admitted. She gave him a sharp look. "And now," he smiled faintly, "now I don't have a choice. For a moment." Her anger faded, replaced by something she couldn't name. Something soft and dangerous. She turned away. "I'll check the lower tunnel," she muttered, pretending to focus on her scanner. When she stepped deeper into the mine, her scanner beeped. A weak signal came from beneath the floor panels. Old and buried, she knelt, prying open a metal plate, revealing a small compartment full of dust and wires. Inside lay another beacon, but older alien, not Terran. Its surface carved with symbols she didn't recognize. "What is that?" Blake asked. Kneeling beside her, Celia's voice trembled. "It's not human tech. It's Nevarian. Very old." She brushed her fingers over it, and it lit up, responding to her touch. A soft hum filled the tunnel, and for a second the air shimmered, like a projection trying to form. Then the image of a star map flickered in the air, showing several colonies including Nerith 9 linked by faint blue lines. Blake's eyes widened. "That's a jump route network," Celia whispered. "Not just any. This shows hidden gates, ones no Terran map ever showed." The realization hit them both at once. Someone had buried this map long before humans came to this sector. Maybe the Terrans found it and built their new device from it. Maybe that was the secret Blake stumbled upon. The beacon suddenly dimmed, its power fading. Celia closed the compartment. "We need to protect this." Blake nodded. "And get off this planet." She looked at him seriously. "You can't just leave. They'll follow you." "They'll follow this," he sighed. "Then we destroy it." She shook her head quickly. "No. This could prove everything. They're using Forbidden's tech. If the Concord learns this, the war could stop." Blake stared at her, torn between duty and survival. Finally, he said, "Then we hide it Celia smiled faintly. Now you sound like me. They worked through the night, sealing the alien beacon inside a hidden chamber below the tunnel floor. Celia built a new energy seal from her mining equipment. Blake covered the entrance with heavy crates and rubble. When it was done, she stepped back. No one will find it here. He nodded. Let's hope not. As dawn broke, faint light spilled into the tunnel. They sat together by the entrance, too tired to speak. For the first time, Blake looked at her not as an alien mechanic, but as an ally, maybe even a friend. She handed him a ration bar and said, "For a human fugitive, you don't eat much." He smiled. "Maybe I'm learning from you. Less noise, less trouble, outside." The clouds began to clear, but above the planet, ships moved in silent orbit, scanning for a signal that was no longer there. And deep beneath the floor, two beacons, one human, one alien waited side by side, holding a secret that could change the fate of every world in the sector. The night sky over Nerith 9 burned with silent storms. Metal clouds drifted low, glowing faintly with static and red lightning. Blake and Celia reached the valley edge just before dawn, their boots soaked with mud. Behind them, the old mining tunnel lay hidden, guarding the secret buried beneath its floor. They stopped for breath beside a ridge of black stone. Celia checked her wrist scanner. "No drones nearby," she said softly. Blake nodded, though his eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. "They'll come, they always do." He looked older now, like every breath carried a piece of war with it. Celia could see it, the way his shoulders never relaxed, the way his hand never strayed far from his weapon. "Come on," she said. "The cabin is still the only place with full power. We can build a jammer there." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right. But we move fast." The two started down the narrow trail, the rising wind carrying the metallic scent of rain and ozone. Celia walked ahead, every few steps glancing back to make sure he was still behind her. She had never felt safer and more afraid at the same time. By midday, the fog had lifted enough for them to see the plains again. Their little cabin sat in the distance, quiet, smoke curling from the chimney. Celia froze. "That's wrong," she whispered. Blake raised his rifle, his visor scanning the area. "You left the fire burning." "No," she said quickly. "I turned everything off before we left." A second later, a thin trail of light shot from the hills, striking the cabin roof. The explosion ripped through the valley, throwing dirt and smoke high into the air. The blast wave hit them a moment later, knocking Celia to the ground. Blake caught her arm, pulling her behind a boulder, debris raining down around them. When the dust cleared, the cabin was gone, just a smoking crater surrounded by burning scrap. Celia's voice shook. "They found us." Blake's jaw tightened. "No, they followed me. Above the ridge, 3 hunter drones circled, their red eyes sweeping the ground. They fired again, plasma bolts exploding near their hiding spot. "Move!" Blake shouted, grabbing Celia and running toward the canyon wall. They dove into a trench just as another blast hit, the heat washing over them. Celia coughed, trying to catch her breath. Blake leaned out, fired 2 quick bursts from his rifle, and one drone fell in flames. The other 2 darted higher, their wings whirring like angry insects. "They're calling reinforcements," Celia warned. Watching her scanner flash red, Blake looked at her. "Then we end this fast." He took a deep breath, adjusted the charge on his weapon, and stood tall in the open. The drones turned, locking onto his heat signature. "Blake, don't," she cried. But he didn't move back. He fired again, a blinding white streak cutting through the smoke. One drone exploded mid-air, but the last one dove straight at him. The impact threw him backward, his armor cracking under the blast. Celia screamed, running to him, her hands glowing as she tried to patch the damaged circuits. "Stay down," he said through gritted teeth. Blood streaking his temple, she ignored him, pulling out a small pulse grenade from her belt. "Cover your ears," she whispered, and tossed it. The grenade went off with a soundless flash. The last drone froze in midair, then dropped lifelessly into the dirt. For a moment, there was silence, no buzzing, no fire, just the sound of rain starting again. Celia knelt beside him, her breath shaking. "You're hurt," he smiled weakly. "You should see the other guy." She tore a strip from her sleeve and wrapped his arm. Her hands trembled, not from fear but from anger. "They destroyed my home," she said, her voice breaking. Blake looked at the crater, his face hard. "Then we make them pay." They stayed hidden until the storm grew thicker. Celia used her tools to build a small field emitter from the scraps she carried. "It'll mask our signals for a few hours," she said. Connecting wires with trembling hands, Blake sat beside her, watching. "You're good at this," she smirked. "You learn fast when survival's your hobby." When the emitter powered up, the air shimmered slightly. The scanners on the drones above flickered and went blind. For now, they were invisible. Celia leaned back against the stone. Closing her eyes, Blake looked at her, exhaustion softening his features. "You didn't have to stay," he said quietly. She opened her eyes, meeting his. "I didn't want to leave." Lightning flashed again. Reflecting in her violet eyes, for the first time, Blake noticed how calm she looked, even surrounded by fire and ruin. "Why help me?" he asked. She gave a small smile. "Because you didn't lie. You didn't act like most humans I've met." He tilted his head. "And how do they act? Like the galaxy belongs to them," she said. "You act like it's your burden," he laughed softly, then winced from the pain. "I'll take that as a compliment," he said. Celia looked away, her cheeks faintly glowing. "Take it however you want, soldier." In the distance, the burning cabin cast a red glow over the valley. It was more than a home. It had been a symbol of quiet life, of peace. Now it was gone, and something new had taken its place. A bond built from danger, fire, and shared defiance. As night fell again, Blake and Celia sat beneath the overhang. The storm outside faded, leaving only a faint hum from the ruined drones. Above the clouds, Terran warships moved closer to orbit, drawn by signals of battle. But down in the canyon, 2 fugitives, 1 human. 1 alien waited in silence. Neither spoke of tomorrow, because surviving tonight was enough. And as the last spark from the burning cabin died out, Blake whispered softly, "We'll rebuild. Somewhere they can't find us." Celia looked at him and smiled faintly. "If you can fit." He laughed weakly, the sound warm and human against the cold wind. Somewhere in the darkness, hope still lived. And on a broken world at the edge of the stars, 2 hearts began to burn brighter than the fire they left behind. Dawn crept slowly over the broken hills of Nereth 9. The fires from the night battle still smoked in the distance. Painting the valley in gray and red, Celia sat near the canyon edge, her arms wrapped around her knees, watching the first light touch the clouds. Beside her, Blake rested against a rock. His armor cracked, his face tired but alive. For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was the soft hiss of cooling metal and the whisper of the wind. Celia turned to him, her voice low. "You should rest." "Human," he smiled faintly. "I'll rest when we're safe," she sighed. "Safe isn't real, not anymore." Blake looked at the sky, where faint streaks of warships moved among the clouds. "They'll come again," he said. "As long as that secret stays buried here?" Celia shook her head. "No. As long as truth stays hidden." Her eyes glowed softly, full of quiet fire. "The Concord must know what your fleet did." He frowned. "And if they silence you too?" She met his gaze, unafraid. "Then someone else will speak." Blake admired her courage. This small alien who had risked everything for a human fugitive. You could leave, he said. There's still a chance to hide. Far from all this, Celia laughed softly. And what? Go back to fixing broken drones. She looked at him. I found something bigger than survival. He blinked. What's that? Purpose, she said simply. Blake tried to stand, his legs shaking under the weight of damaged armor. Celia rushed to help, but he waved her off. I'm fine. You're not, she said, her tone sharp but caring. He smiled. You sound like my old commander. Was she stubborn too? Worse, he chuckled, then winced from pain. They walked together to what remained of the cabin. Only fragments of walls and scorched earth remained. Celia knelt, picking up a small metal piece, Blake's broken badge. She brushed the ashes off and handed it to him. Guess this means you're officially homeless, she said with a teasing smirk. He laughed quietly. Then I'll need a new place to stay. Her smile softened. If you can fit. They both laughed, just for a moment, forgetting the smoke. The war and the fear. Then the wind changed, carrying a new sound-distant engines. Not drones this time, but heavy atmospheric thrusters. Celia looked up, scanning the horizon. Dropships, she whispered. Blake's expression hardened. Fleet or pirates? She adjusted her scanner. Not pirates. Signal codes looked Terran. Then they found me, he said. His voice heavy. He took a deep breath and stepped back. You should go. Celia stared at him. What are you doing? I'll lead them away, he said. They want me, not you. No, she said firmly. You're not doing this alone, Celia, he said softly. If they catch both of us. Everything we've done, everything we found dies here. Her heart pounded. You'll die, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Maybe. But if you get that data to the Concord, it won't be for nothing. She shook her head, tears forming. You humans always think dying fixes things. He looked at her, his blue eyes calm. No, but sometimes it buys someone else a chance to live. A moment passed, silent and endless. Then Celia stepped forward and pressed her forehead against his chest. Promise me, she said, her voice trembling. You'll come back. He closed his eyes, his large hand resting on her shoulder. I promise, even if he didn't believe it. He said it because she needed to hear it, because he wanted it to be true. He handed her a small data chip, glowing faintly blue. The beacon's copy, he said. Hide it, protect it. And when you find someone you trust, send it to them. She nodded slowly. And you? I'll draw their fire, he said, activating his armor, the plates locking into place with a hiss. Celia clenched her fists, her voice breaking. You stupid. Brave human, he smiled. You forgot Bulky. As he walked toward the rising dust of incoming ships, Celia felt her throat tighten. She wanted to call out, to stop him. But something in his stride told her she couldn't. This was who he was, someone built to face storms, so others could see the sun. When the first ship descended, Blake raised his weapon and fired a flare into the sky. The ships turned toward him instantly, their engines roaring. Celia watched from the canyon edge as light filled the valley. Blake moved like a shadow against the fire, each shot he fired echoing like thunder. The last thing she saw before the smoke swallowed him was his silhouette standing tall, unbroken, defiant, and then silence hours later. The sky was empty again. Celia walked through the ashes, her heart heavy but steady. She buried the data chip beneath a stone marked with his broken badge. Looking up at the stars, she whispered, You said you'd fit. And you did. That night, a faint blue signal blinked once from the ridge far away, but alive. A coded pulse that would travel across sectors, carrying proof of everything they'd fought for. Somewhere beyond the stars, someone would hear it. And maybe, just maybe, Blake would too. Celia stood in the cold wind, smiling softly. The galaxy was vast, cruel, and full of lies, but also full of people like him. Humans who carried hope even when everything burned. As the dawn light rose again, she whispered into the wind, "The promise beyond the stars is you?"